The mockery started with the menu. "Frank, are you sure you can afford this place? Steaks here run $75 to $90. Maybe we should go to Applebee's instead." Laughter around the table. 8 businessmen in expensive suits. 1 farmer in Wranglers and a flannel shirt. It was Tuesday lunch, March 11th, 2025. The Riverside Steakhouse in Des Moines. White tablecloths, crystal glasses. The kind of restaurant where expense accounts paid the bills. Derek Hamilton had invited 9 people to discuss his consulting firm's services. 8 were successful businessmen, company owners, executives, high earners. The 9th was Frank Morrison, a farmer from Madison County. Frank's invitation was a mistake. Derek's assistant had meant to invite Frank's neighbor, a large-scale farmer with 3,000 acres. Instead, she'd invited Frank. By the time Derek realized the error, Frank had already shown up. Now Derek was making the best of it by making Frank the butt of jokes. Seriously though, Frank farms what, 300 acres? That's barely a garden. Must be tough competing with real farmers. Frank didn't respond, just studied his menu quietly. The waiter came. Everyone ordered. Expensive cuts. The cheapest steak was $78. Most ordered the $95 ribeye. Derek ordered a $120 tomahawk steak and a bottle of wine for the table, a Napa Cabernet priced at $280. "Frank, what'll you have?" Derek asked with exaggerated politeness. "The ribeye, medium rare." "Big spender, $95 for lunch. That's probably your weekly grocery budget, right?" More laughter. Frank set down his menu. "It's fine." "No, seriously," Derek continued. "How does a guy farming 300 acres afford a $95 steak? Do you guys get government subsidies or something?" The table went quiet. That comment crossed a line. One of the businessmen, Paul, tried changing subjects. "Derek, you mentioned your firm handles agricultural consulting. What services specifically?" Derek took the deflection but couldn't resist one more jab. "We help real farmers, operations over 1,000 acres, optimize their business. We don't really work with hobby farms. No offense, Frank." "None taken," Frank said calmly. Lunch arrived. The steaks were perfect. Conversation flowed around Frank like he wasn't there. Derek dominated, talking about his consulting firm's success, his recent purchase of a lake house, his new Audi. "Spent $92,000 on the Audi. Fully loaded. You ever driven a luxury car, Frank?" "I drive a truck." "Right. What year?" 1998. Derek nearly spit out his wine. "You drive a 27-year-old truck? Frank, you can't afford a new vehicle. Surely farming generates enough for a down payment." "The truck works fine, but it's 27 years old. What's that say about your operation?" Paul interrupted again. "Derek, maybe we should discuss business." But Derek was enjoying himself. He'd had 3 glasses of expensive wine and felt invincible. No, I'm genuinely curious." "Frank, you farm 300 acres with a 27-year-old truck. Help me understand the economics. What do you net annually?" Frank took a sip of water. "I do all right. Ballpark, 50,000? 60? I'm comfortable." "Comfortable? That's politicians speak for broke." Derek laughed at his own joke. Dessert menus arrived. Derek ordered the most expensive option for the table, a chocolate soufflé that required 20 minutes to prepare. $38 per person. As they waited for dessert, Frank excused himself, walked to the front of the restaurant, spoke quietly to the manager, came back, sat down, said nothing. Derek was mid-story about closing a major client when the waiter appeared with desserts, set them down, then said, "Gentlemen, your bill has been settled." Derek looked confused. "What? I didn't pay yet." Another gentleman at the table paid, the entire bill, including wine and desserts. Everyone looked around. "Who paid?" Frank raised his hand slightly. "I took care of it." Dead silence. Derek's smile faded. "You paid? For all 9 of us?" "Yes." "How much was it?" The waiter answered, $863 with tips, sir. Derek's face went pale. $863? You paid $863 cash? Yes. Where'd you get that kind of money? Frank pulled his wallet from his back pocket. Old leather wallet, worn smooth. Opened it. Inside were several more $100 bills. I keep cash for expenses. That's... Derek couldn't finish. Paul leaned forward. Frank, that was very generous. Thank you. You're welcome. Derek tried recovering. Well, that's... Thank you, Frank. Though I could have paid. This was my lunch invitation. I know, but you spent the last 90 minutes telling everyone I'm too poor to be here. Figured I'd clear that up. The table froze. Frank continued, his voice calm but firm. Derek, you assumed because I farm 300 acres and drive an old truck that I'm broke. You're wrong. I farm 300 acres because that's all I need. I drive a 1998 truck because it works perfectly fine. I wear Wranglers because they're practical. None of that means I'm poor. I didn't mean... You did mean it. You spent 90 minutes mocking me, asking if I could afford the menu, calling my farm a hobby, implying I'm on government assistance. You made assumptions based on appearance. Derek had no response. Frank stood. Thank you for lunch. I won't be using your consulting services. And, gentlemen, he addressed the other businessmen, if you're looking for someone who understands actual farming economics instead of expensive suits and luxury cars, my number's in the county directory. Frank left. The table sat in silence. Derek's face was red. The most expensive lunch he'd never paid for just became the most expensive lesson he'd ever received. Within a week, 5 of the 8 businessmen at that lunch had called Frank. 3 hired him as a consultant. Word spread about the farmer who'd been mocked, then paid $863 cash without blinking. Derek's consulting firm lost 2 major contracts that quarter. Clients cited culture concerns. The businessman who mocked the farmer learned that assumptions are expensive. The farmer who paid the tab proved that quiet wealth is real wealth. Sometimes the poorest-looking person at the table is the richest. Sometimes mockery costs more than $863. And sometimes, before dessert arrives, the entire script flips. But the full story of that lunch, how Frank Morrison could casually pay $863 and why Derek Hamilton's mockery backfired so catastrophically, requires understanding both men's journeys. Frank Morrison, the silent wealth builder. Frank bought his 300 acres in 1987. He was 26 years old, worked construction for 7 years, saved $45,000, used it as down payment. Land cost $800 per acre, $240,000 total, borrowed $195,000 at 9.2% over 20 years. His monthly payment was $1,780. Crushing for a young farmer. Frank's strategy was simple. Pay it off fast. He farmed spring through fall, worked construction winters. First decade was brutal, 80-hour weeks, made $55,000 to $65,000 combined income annually. After land payment, living expenses had maybe $6,000 left. But he paid extra on the land every year, $5,000 extra in 1988, $8,000 in 1989, $12,000 in 1990. By 1999, 12 years after purchase, Frank owned 300 acres free and clear. He was 38. With no land payment, everything changed. Farming income by 1999 averaged $52,000 annually. Winter construction added $18,000. Total $70,000. Living expenses stayed minimal, $12,000 yearly. Savings, $58,000 per year. Frank maintained this discipline for 26 years, 1999 through 2025, Average savings, 58,000 annually. Total, 1,508,000 saved. He invested conservatively, municipal bonds, dividend stocks, kept some cash. The 1,508,000 grew through compound interest to approximately 3,200,000 by March 2025. Add land value, 300 acres at 5,000 per acre equals 1,500,000. Add equipment and buildings, 280,000. Total net worth, 5,080,000. Frank Morrison farmed 300 acres and was worth $5 million. Drove a 1998 Chevy Silverado with 312,000 miles. Wore Wranglers until they had holes. Lived in the same house since 1987. Nobody who saw him would guess. That was exactly how Frank wanted it. Derek Hamilton, the leveraged showman. Derek started his agricultural consulting firm in 2012, borrowed $180,000 from investors, built financial models and analysis tools for large farming operations. The business grew quickly, by 2015 grossing $2 million annually, by 2020 $6 million, by 2025 $11 million. Impressive numbers. But Derek's personal take was less impressive than it seemed. The business had high overhead, 7 employees, expensive office space in Des Moines, constant technology upgrades, marketing costs. Net profit ran about 12% on 11 million gross. That's 1,320,000 net profit. Derek owned 60% of the company. His cut $792,000 annually. Sounds like a fortune, but Derek spent aggressively. House, $950,000 with $680,000 mortgage. Payment, $4,200 monthly. 2 vehicles, Audi Q7 for $92,000, leased wife's Mercedes for $78,000. Combined payments, $2,100 monthly. Lake House, $420,000 with $350,000 mortgage. Payment, $2,300 monthly. Country club membership, $22,000 annually. Private school for 2 kids, $38,000 annually. After taxes and lifestyle costs, Derek saved maybe $70,000 per year. Over 13 years in business, accumulated $910,000 in savings and investments. His net worth looked like this. Primary house equity, $270,000 lake house equity, $70,000 company ownership, worth maybe $2 million on paper, but unsellable without destroying business savings. $910,000 total liquid net worth, $1,250,000. Derek looked rich, acted rich, but was moderately wealthy at best. Frank looked poor, acted humble, was actually worth 4 times what Derek was. The lunch was these 2 world views colliding. The lunch, minute by minute. The mockery didn't start immediately. First 20 minutes were normal business discussion. Derek explained his firm's services, discussed precision agriculture consulting. Then Derek asked each person about their operation. When Frank's turn came, I farm 300 acres. Madison County, corn and bean rotation. That's when Derek's eyes lit up. 300 acres was tiny compared to others at the table who managed operations of 2,000 to 5,000 acres. Derek saw an opportunity to establish hierarchy, make Frank the example of what not to be. First jab was gentle. 300 acres, nice starter operation, planning to expand. No. Really? Most farmers grow over time. Why stay small? Because 300 is enough for my needs. Derek smiled condescendingly. Enough is relative. In modern agriculture, scale equals efficiency. 300 acres barely justifies equipment costs. Frank didn't argue, just listened. Second jab came with the menu comment. Frank, you sure you can afford this place? Frank ignored it. ordered the $95 ribeye without hesitation. Third jab came harder. How does a 300-acre operation afford $95 steaks, government subsidies? That crossed into insulting territory. Paul, one of the other businessmen, shot Derek a look. Derek ignored it. Fourth jab was the truck question. When Frank admitted to driving a 1998 model, Derek practically crowed with delight. 27 years old! Frank, buddy, you need to upgrade. What's that say about your profitability? Says I don't waste money on depreciating assets. Or says you can't afford better. The entire lunch continued this pattern. Derek establishing dominance, Frank taking it quietly. The waiter later described Frank's demeanor. He looked completely calm, not angry, not embarrassed, just patient, like he was waiting for something. What Frank was waiting for was the right moment, and that moment was dessert. The payment. When Frank excused himself before dessert arrived, most people assumed he was going to the restroom. Derek joked, "Frank's probably looking for the cheapest item on the menu to order separately." Frank went to the manager's desk, spoke quietly. "I'd like to pay for table 12, all of it." The manager pulled up the bill. "Sir, that's $806 before tip. Are you certain?" "Add 20% tip. I'll pay $968 total." "Cash or card?" Frank pulled out his worn wallet, counted out 10 $100 bills. "Keep the change." The manager's eyes widened. Frank just paid $968 cash and tipped an extra $32 beyond the automatic 20%. When Frank returned to the table, he knew what was about to happen, waited calmly. Desserts arrived, then the waiter's announcement, then the shock. Derek's face went through visible stages: confusion, disbelief, embarrassment, anger, finally settling on humiliation. The other businessmen at the table had varied reactions. Paul was impressed. Frank, that was incredibly generous. Two others nodded agreement. Three looked uncomfortable, realizing they'd laughed at Frank's expense. Derek looked destroyed. Frank's departure speech was measured but devastating. He didn't yell, didn't curse, just calmly pointed out every assumption Derek had made and why each was wrong. As Frank walked out, Derek tried one last recovery. "Well, thank you, Frank, very generous." Frank stopped at the door, turned back. "Derek, it wasn't generosity. It was a lesson. You assumed I couldn't afford to be here. I just proved you wrong. Remember this the next time you judge someone by their truck." Then he left. The table sat in awkward silence. Finally, Paul spoke. "Derek, what the hell was that?" Derek had no answer. The aftermath. The consequences for Derek Hamilton were severe and immediate. Within 3 days, two of the businessmen at that lunch called Frank. Paul Edwards, who managed an 1,800-acre operation, hired Frank as a financial consultant. "Frank, Derek spent 90 minutes mocking you. You responded by proving your point with cash. That's character. I want to work with someone who has character." Michael Chen, who owned a farm equipment dealership, also hired Frank. "Anyone who can pay $968 without blinking while wearing old jeans has figured something out I need to learn." Within 2 weeks, rumors of the lunch had spread through Des Moines farming circles. Derek Hamilton mocked a farmer at lunch. Farmer paid the whole bill in cash. Made Derek look like an idiot. Derek's consulting firm felt the impact. 2 major clients declined to renew contracts. One specifically cited, "We heard about your behavior at the Riverside lunch. That's not how we treat people." Derek lost approximately $240,000 in annual revenue from those 2 contracts. His partners at the firm were furious. "Derek, your ego just cost us $250,000. What were you thinking?" Derek had no good answer. Meanwhile, Frank's phone rang constantly. By end of March 2025, he'd been contacted by 11 farming operations asking for consulting help. Frank wasn't even trying to be a consultant. He just farmed his 300 acres. But people wanted his wisdom. "Frank, how did you build wealth farming small?" His answer was always the same. Own, don't rent. Pay off, don't finance. Save, don't spend. Live below your means. It's not complicated. Just difficult because it requires decades of discipline. By June 2025, Frank had 7 consulting clients, made $68,000 in consulting fees, still farmed his 300 acres full-time. Total income, farming $62,000, consulting $68,000, investment income $96,000. Total $226,000. Living expenses still $12,000 yearly. Savings $214,000 that year alone. Derek's decline. Derek tried to recover from the lunch incident but struggled. His business survived, but reputation suffered. Former clients told stories. Derek Hamilton is the guy who mocked a millionaire farmer for being poor. Derek's company revenue dropped from 11 million to 9.2 million. His personal take dropped from 792,000 to 634,000. Still good money. But the trajectory reversed. Growth stopped. Decline started. His partners forced changes. Derek stepped back from client-facing roles in September 2025. "You're toxic with clients. Stay in the office." Derek went from company face to back-office operations. His ego couldn't handle it. By December 2025, Derek was considering selling his ownership stake. "If I can't run client relationships, what's the point?" His partners were open to buying him out. For $1,400,000, 30% less than the $2 million Derek thought his stake was worth. Derek faced a choice: accept the lowball offer or stay in a diminished role. The lesson spreads. The story of Frank Morrison and Derek Hamilton became a teaching tale in Iowa agricultural circles. Frank was invited to speak at a Farm Bureau meeting in November 2025. Topic: Building wealth on small acres. His message was consistent with his life. You don't need 3,000 acres. You need zero debt. I've met farmers with 5,000 acres who are broke. Met farmers with 200 acres who are millionaires. The difference isn't size, it's ownership. Derek Hamilton mocked me at lunch because I farm 300 acres and drive an old truck. He assumed those things meant poverty. He was wrong. I'm worth $5 million. Derek probably thinks he's worth more because he has the big company and the Audi and the lake house, but he's leveraged to his eyeballs. I own everything. He owes everyone. The lesson Derek learned at that lunch cost him $968 plus $240,000 in lost business. Expensive lesson. But some people need expensive lessons. The audience gave Frank a standing ovation. 3 young farmers approached afterward. All asked the same basic question: how do I build what you built? Frank's answer: start today, stop borrowing, pay off what you owe, save aggressively, live cheap, do this for 30 years, you'll be wealthy, not quickly, but certainly. The final encounter. In December 2025, Frank and Derek encountered each other at an agricultural trade show in Des Moines. Derek saw Frank first, almost walked away, but guilt and curiosity stopped him. Frank turned. Derek. Awkward pause. I owe you an apology for the lunch, for the mockery. I was out of line. Frank studied Derek. Yes, you were. I judged you based on appearance, made assumptions. I was wrong. You were. For what it's worth, I learned from it. Did you? What did you learn? Derek thought. That looking successful and being successful are different things. I look successful. You are successful. I was too arrogant to see the difference. Frank nodded. That's fair. Apology accepted. Your consulting business is doing well, I hear. It's not really a business, just helping people who ask. But yes, it's going well. Taking my clients. They came to me, Derek. I didn't pursue them. Derek knew that was true. What do I do now? My reputation is shot. My partners want to buy me out. My firm is declining. Frank considered. You want honest advice? Yes. Sell your stake. Take the money. Pay off your debts. Stop trying to look rich. Actually become financially secure. You're smart enough. You just prioritize the wrong things. What do you mean? You bought the Audi to impress clients, the lake house to show success, the country club membership for status. None of that built wealth. All of it drained wealth. I bought nothing, built everything. Derek absorbed this. It's too late to change now. I'm 49, in debt, declining income. It's never too late. Sell the stake, pay off the mortgages, keep the primary house, sell the lake house. Ditch the expensive cars, cut your lifestyle in half, save the rest. In 10 years, you'll actually be wealthy instead of just looking wealthy. Derek nodded slowly. Thank you, Frank. You're welcome. And Derek, next time you meet someone in old jeans driving an old truck, remember this conversation before you mock them. They parted. Frank went back to his trade show booth. Derek left early, thinking about Frank's advice. The businessman who mocked the farmer at lunch learned the most expensive lesson of his life. The farmer who paid the tab taught it perfectly. $863 was nothing to Frank, everything to Derek's reputation. Sometimes the poorest-looking person is the richest. Sometimes mockery costs more than money. Sometimes, before dessert arrives, the entire world flips. And sometimes a worn leather wallet full of $100 bills teaches more than a business degree ever could. Never judge a farmer by his truck. The lesson Derek Hamilton learned, the wisdom Frank Morrison lived, the lunch that changed everything, the tab that proved it all, the mockery that backfired completely. Quiet wealth wins. Always. Epilogue. 1 year later, March 2026, marked 1 year since the infamous lunch. The changes in both men's lives were measurable and stark. Frank's world. Frank still farmed 300 acres, still drove the 1998 Silverado, now with 328,000 miles, still wore Wranglers and flannel, but his consulting practice had grown organically. By March 2026, he had 12 regular clients, made $114,000 in annual consulting fees, working approximately 15 hours per week. Combined income, farming $68,000, consulting $114,000, investments $108,000. Total $290,000 annually. Living expenses crept up to $16,000 yearly. Frank had upgraded from generic groceries to name brand, but he still lived in radical frugality compared to his income. Savings $274,000 in year 2 after the lunch. Net worth grew from $5,080,000 to $5,640,000. Over $500,000 in wealth added in 1 year through disciplined saving and investment returns. Frank had become inadvertently famous in Iowa farming circles, known as the farmer who paid the tab or the millionaire in Wranglers. Young farmers sought his advice constantly. Frank developed a standard response. I'm not special. I just avoided debt and saved for 40 years. Anyone can do this. Most won't because it's boring and requires delaying gratification, but anyone can. Derek's transformation. Derek took Frank's advice seriously. In January 2026, he sold his 60% stake in the consulting firm for $1,380,000. Even less than the $1,400,000 originally offered, because the firm's value had declined further. After taxes, Derek netted $970,000. He used it strategically, paid off lake house mortgage, $350,000 paid off primary house mortgage, $680,000 total, had $270,000 equity, needed $410,000 to clear it. Total debt elimination, $760,000. Remaining $210,000 went into conservative investments. Derek sold the lake house for $460,000. After sale costs, netted $428,000. all into investments, sold the leased Audi and Mercedes, bought a 3-year-old Honda CR-V for $28,000 cash, quit country club, moved kids to public school. They protested, but adjusted. Derek's new financial reality: own primary house free and clear, worth $950,000, no mortgage investments, $638,000, generating approximately $28,000 annually. No consumer debt. Living expenses dropped from $140,000 to $52,000 annually. Derek got a job as financial consultant for a farming cooperative. Salary, $95,000. Not glamorous, but stable. Total income: salary $95,000 plus investment income, $28,000 equals $123,000. Living expenses $52,000. Savings $71,000 annually. For the first time in his adult life, Derek was building real wealth instead of the appearance of wealth. His ex-partners at the consulting firm were shocked. Derek actually took the buyout and changed his whole lifestyle. Never thought he'd do it. Derek told his wife, "I spent 25 years chasing the wrong things. Frank Morrison, farming 300 acres, taught me more in one lunch than my MBA did in 2 years. I'm done pretending to be rich. Time to actually become financially secure." The ripple effect. The story of the lunch continued spreading. By March 2026, it had been referenced in Farm Journal magazine article, "The Danger of Judging by Appearances," Iowa Farm Bureau newsletter, "Lessons from a $900 lunch tab," agricultural podcast interview with Frank, "Building Real Wealth in Farming." The consistent theme: assumptions are dangerous. Quiet wealth is real wealth. Appearances deceive. 3 specific farmers credited Frank's story with changing their approach. James Crawford, 34, had been planning to borrow $280,000 to expand from 400 to 700 acres. After hearing Frank's story, he cancelled the expansion. "Frank proved you can build wealth on small acres. I was about to go into massive debt trying to look like a successful farmer. Instead, I'll be a successful farmer by staying small and debt-free." Rachel Martinez, 41, owned 500 acres, but owed $390,000 in equipment and land debt. Felt trapped. After consulting with Frank, she sold 200 acres, paid off all debt, farmed 300 debt-free. "I'm making less gross revenue, but more net income, and sleeping better than I have in 15 years. Kevin Williamson, 28, was working at a bank, but wanted to farm. Thought he needed 500 acres minimum to be viable. Frank's story changed his mind. "If Frank built millions on 300 acres, I can build something on 200. I'm buying land I can actually afford instead of borrowing to look big." The legacy. The businessman who mocked the farmer at lunch learned humility and changed his life. The farmer who paid the tab never sought attention but became a reluctant teacher. Derek Hamilton went from leveraged pretender to genuine wealth builder. Still had a long way to go at 50, but moving the right direction. Frank Morrison continued farming 300 acres, driving his old truck, wearing Wranglers, and quietly accumulating millions, while helping others understand that real wealth doesn't need an Audi to prove itself. The lunch at the Riverside Steakhouse cost $863. Derek's mockery cost him $240,000 in lost business, his consulting firm role, and years of misdirected priorities. Frank's payment of $863 earned him respect, consulting clients, and the satisfaction of proving that quiet competence beats loud arrogance. 1 year later, the lesson remained: never judge a farmer by his truck. The poorest-looking person might be the richest, the flashiest person might be the brokest, and sometimes before dessert arrives, the entire script flips. The mocker becomes the student, the mocked becomes the teacher. $863 well spent, a life lesson priceless, a truth eternal. The farmer in Wranglers was worth 5 million. The businessman in the suit was leveraged and struggling. Appearances lied. Bank accounts told truth. That's farming wisdom. That's life wisdom. That's what happened when mockery met reality over $95 steaks and $280 wine. The businessman learned, the farmer taught, the lessons spread. Never judge by appearances. Always respect quiet competence. Remember that wealth whispers while poverty shouts. That's what Derek Hamilton learned at the Riverside Steakhouse. That's what Frank Morrison proved with a worn leather wallet full of hundreds. The lunch that changed everything. The mockery that backfired. The payment that proved the point. Quiet wealth wins always.